coffee. So my job is to moderate a panel where we are going to talk about what are the implications, the likely implications and potential of digitization, digital currencies, Caribbean Settlement Network, from each of the perspectives of my panelists. So let me introduce them briefly. We have Jeff Scott, CEO of ICBL, on my extreme left. We have Alicia Nicholls, who's with the Sir Sridas Ramphal Center of UAE here in Barbados. She's a trade and development specialist. We have Racquel Moses, who is the head of the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. And we have John Williams, who heads up Cape Shepherd Group. So I want to start off first by asking Alicia, we've heard a lot about the Caribbean Settlement Network in terms of what it can do for payments and what it can do for improving efficiencies and ease of doing business. As Justin said, in the Caribbean, there are some countries where doing business is more difficult in the Caribbean than in Gaza. I never thought that was the case, but anyway, I would like to ask Alicia to tell us what are the likely trade and development and other implications from your perspective of digitization and of the Caribbean Settlement Network. And Alicia has written extensively on trade and bilateral and multilateral trade agreements within this region and outside of this region, and so no better than Alicia to tell us about this. So you kick it off, Alicia.
Thank you very much, Marla, and good afternoon to everyone. It certainly is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Marla, and thank you, Bitt, for the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon and to talk about this very important and transformative initiative that you guys have come up with. And I also want to firstly thank my colleagues as well from the SRC who are here. So, Marla, you will recall my very enthusiastic response when you had talked to me about the whole prospect of the Caribbean Settlement Network. I don't know how many of you here are from the Lions Club. I'm a Lion, and one of the things we say in Lions, our motto is we serve. And I think that applies to Bitt, because Bitt is serving the region, and is doing so in a way because it sees a problem and is going to address that problem with innovative and creative solutions through the CSN. So we all know what the problem is, most of us who do trade across the region. The previous speaker, Mr. McKenzie, highlighted it. Other speakers highlighted them in terms of the fact that nearly half a century after the signing of the original Treaty of Chaguaramas, we still don't have a single Caribbean economy or a single market. Well, single Caribbean economy, rather. We're light years away from the full achievement of the CSME. So that brings about several challenges, not just in terms, as you would have heard, about the need to utilize the fact that we don't have free convertibility of currencies, but the need to utilize correspondent banking relationships in metropolitan countries. And also there are several challenges which really bring about the imperative for integration within the Caribbean. So one of the net results of these challenges is that there's very low trade, intra-regional trade in the Caribbean. And this is not to say that the issues with limited free movement of capital is the main issue. There are several barriers to trade within the region. So some of them you would have heard of in terms of logistical barriers. But the lack of free movement of capital is a factor. So I'll give you guys some statistics. Intra-CARICOM trade, inclusive of OECS trade, was 14% in 2017. Now compare this to intra-Africa trade, which is 17%. Not much better, but still. Intra-ASEAN trade, which is 25%. Intra-OECS trade, as you know, they have a currency union, the ECCU, which is 38%, and the EU, of course, which is nearly 70%.
Could I just stop you there?
Sure.
Alicia, I just want to drive that point home, that in CARICOM, intra-CARICOM trade accounts for only what you said?
14%.
14% of total trade.
Of total trade.
Whereas in the EU, it's 70.
Nearly 70%.
Nearly 70%. So
Yes.
that just tells you the extent of the kind of gap that we can fill if we made intra-regional payments more efficient.
Exactly. So there have been previous attempts at trying to remedy this problem of the lack of a regional clearing facility. So for instance, there was the Interregional Payment Scheme, there was the Caribbean Multilateral Clearance Facility, followed by the CARICOM Travelers Checks Facility, and for several reasons they failed. So I'm saying all of this to show you that it has been recognized for a long time that there is the need to remedy this problem. So how will the CSN remedy this problem? So I'll go through a few points, if you indulge me, Madam Moderator. So the CSN, it will reduce dependence on US dollars. So there will be possible foreign exchange savings. It will reduce dependence on correspondent banking relations. And of course, you know, we're facing the whole de-risking issue, which has implications for our financial integration in the world economy and what have you. So there'll be real-time payment, so lower waiting times, which is awesome. I'm sure many of us have done work throughout the region, and it's taken us a while to be paid. There are real-world implications of these things. It will improve it can improve price competitiveness of our regional goods and services. So that should hopefully lead to a greater intra-regional sourcing. And of course, if you're sourcing more intra-regionally, that benefits what? Intra-regional trade. So there will also be hopefully cheaper remittance payments. And of course, that assists with poverty reduction. And of course, right now we're trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And it will assist, all of these will assist with the 4 freedoms: free movement of capital, goods and services, people. So if I wanted to, I could sit in Barbados and I could say, okay, I could take up a job in Trinidad because I know I'll be able, if grandma needs something, as the point was made earlier, I could just send her some money through my mobile wallet. So, and it will also give greater access to data for evidence-based decision-making, as was said in Dr. Ram's presentation. So to conclude, other countries, as we know from previous presentations, have been looking at this, but I think that with the CSN, we have the opportunity to be a trendsetter and not trend takers, as we are in so many cases. There are, of course, issues to consider in terms of data privacy, compliance, like AML, CFT, and what have you. But I think one of the beauties about the CSN is the fact that Bitt has brought together a very highly qualified and diverse working group of experts who will be able to take into consideration all of these things. People from the private sector, CARICOM, legal experts, economists, of course, development bankers, etc. So it is a gargantuan task, but the late Nelson Mandela once said, something always seems impossible until it is. The ECCB is on board, so that, of course, is a good sign. So I would say Bitt is onto something good. And I think it's something that will be truly transformational, not just for regional integration, because we don't want to integrate just for integration's sake. We want to integrate for the sustainable development of the region and to achieve the development imperatives laid out in Article 6 of the revised treaty. So I'm looking forward to chatting more with you guys during the Q&A, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Thanks, Alicia. So there's been a lot of talk in this forum, even though it's a technology event, really, about climate change, about the disaster, of course, most recently in Bahamas, but otherwise. And you're here to tell us, Racquel, how digitization can possibly help us to boost resilience and to help us with disaster preparedness.
Sure, all right. So, hi everybody. You know, we're talking about, we think of resilience at the Accelerator, and our job, our role in climate change is to be able to package deals across the region to boost resilience. And when you think about what has happened in Bahamas, when is the time to donate to Bahamas? When is it? A serious question. When is the time to donate to Bahamas? No, it was last year for them to build resiliently enough Now it is too late. Now we have lost an opportunity. And so we have to think about resilience in terms of not being willing to head out and help after disaster when lives are lost that could have been saved. It is to be able to invest in each other, to build up resilient infrastructure, to ensure that these things, that as many lives are saved as possible. I was at a conference some months ago, and I was talking about the Accelerator, and somebody said, you know, why is the Accelerator doing this? Why are you guys trying to build resilience in the region? And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing that I asked that person to do. I want you to sit up, everybody sit up, and pull your shoulders back. It's about pride. Nobody wants to be rescued. What you want is self-determination. You want to be able to save yourself from a situation. And this is what we have the ability to do by creating this network across the region. We have the ability to change from being victims of climate change to being victors of climate change. We can develop technology. We can deploy solutions. We can create knowledge base in how we do this. We are, as Alicia was saying, we are far too often following when we should be leading. And this is an opportunity for us to lead. And we have to now take that opportunity and run with it. You know, I've heard figures as high as 60%, 65% unbanked in the region and 80% underbanked when you consider the unbanked as well. And you know, how that contributes to digital literacy, how that contributes to just being able to store value, to have a savings account, to be able to recover from a disaster, to be able to access insurance, to be able to access financial services. These are all things that help us to build our resilience that we don't have enough access to because we don't have a digitized currency or a regional network. The other thing that we face at the Accelerator, one of the things that we're trying to build is entrepreneurship in the climate space, to again, turn this disaster into an opportunity for us, an economic opportunity. One of the biggest problems that I face is that entrepreneurs come to us and they're looking for money. And the problem isn't that they're looking for too much money. The problem is that they're looking for too little money. And the investors that we have are looking for investments starting at $2 million. And most of the entrepreneurs that I have are looking for 100 to 200,000. And if they're not able to think about the businesses at a large enough scale to be able to not just be local and national and regional, then we are not ever going to be able to be competitive. And I think an initiative like this has the ability to transform the way that we think about ourselves and how we are able to grow and build ourselves out of this crisis that we're facing in climate change. And, you know, I say to a lot of people, anybody who'd listen, as it relates to climate change, the enemy is not climate change. The number one enemy that I face on a daily basis is time. If we had an infinite amount of time, we would solve this problem. We don't have the time, so I am hoping that we are taking what we're doing here incredibly seriously, because we don't have time to be talking about this 5 years from now. 5 years from now, we're talking about the case study of how we did it. And we're teaching others how you take the path that we've already taken, and how well this is working, and how integrated we are, and how our trade is at 80% interregional because we've taken these steps that we need to take last year.
You know, one of the things that really struck me after Bahamas, Dorian, was I remember very vividly 2 years ago, after Maria and Irma, that having conversations where people were saying, you know, it would be so good if we had an M-money so that we can send money easily to these people because, you know, banking is down, networks are down, ATMs, all of this. And to think that 2 years later, I'm hearing the same conversation. How do you get money to the people who need it to go buy groceries, you know, to buy diesel or gasoline to put in a generator and things like that? And I'm thinking, wow, in 2 years, we've really not. So your point is so valid that what have we done with the 2 years between those storms and this one? And I really feel like I would be heartbroken again if this were to happen a year from now. And we're still having the same conversation, Racquel. We need to find a way to get things done before the next season as soon as possible. But we're happy to support the work that you do and to make sure that that's not a conversation we have next year.
Well, we're happy to support, but we're also happy to push, pull,
Yes.
whatever it's going to take to be able to unlock this potential that we have,
Yep,
that we need to take advantage of.
indeed. And the solutions exist. It's about getting the regulators and getting the execution around making it happen. So let me switch now to talk to Jeff. So Jeff, tell us what you think digitization, digital currencies, the Caribbean Settlement Network, etc., could mean for your space and your business.
Marla, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you on behalf of our colleagues here, and I've got quite a few colleagues from ICBL here with us today. Thanks so much for the chance to come up and be part of this. I'm humbled already by the two that have gone before me, but it's a sign of, I think, alignment of values as well as vision between ICBL and Bitt that we've started a relationship now. We're into our second year. Insurance has a role to play in all of this as well. A lot of what's been said today, I could directly translate it into the insurance business model. But what I'd like to sort of start by saying, and I'll put it out there, is that just as we've talked about underbanked customers, meaning access to the financial system, from an insurance company perspective, we also worry about something called InsurTech, which is the insurance version of FinTech. And I'll tell you that in the Caribbean, there's a significant underinsurance that I think everybody would be aware of, and sadly, it takes tragedies like what's happening in Bahamas for it really to hit home what it means to have 60, 70, even 80% of your homes or businesses uninsured. It's a big problem we have in the Caribbean. So I should start by also saying that I don't believe, sitting here as an insurance company, that I should try to say that our contribution to resilience is learning and bringing our expertise in disaster management and relief and paying claims. We kind of come in typically at the end of this process. We don't tend to come in at the beginning, but we're trying to be a bit more forward-thinking about that, and I think our role is to give advice and to help with understanding where you face risks and making sure you have insurance beforehand. So all of this is to say that financial inclusion is insurance inclusion. It's a big part of what we're talking about with climate resilience is making sure that everybody has access to an affordable amount of insurance, that they understand that it's actually worth paying a little bit every year to possibly maybe never have a claim, or maybe once in 20 years.
But wouldn't it be great if you could pay that claim on an app instantly?
So that would explain, and I'm not going to give away competitive tricks until we actually announce them publicly. Of course, these are the kinds of things that we're looking at all the time. Financial inclusion is making sure that it's available to all of our market, and then the expertise we can bring is making sure that it's desirable. So as was mentioned before, I think the Caribbean Settlement Network is going to do great things for intra-regional trade. Right now, ICBL is still a Barbadian insurance company. We only trade in Barbados right now, but I'll say that there are values to a digital currency that we see. And it's going to be things like payments, not just your ability to pay us for an insurance policy, but for our ability to pay you when there's a claim. We've recently launched some technology with everybody would see the purple trucks driving around the roads in Barbados. They now carry apps themselves that take your claim right at the side of the accident, actually, as soon as the car's, even before it's taken off the road, accelerating this whole process of just dealing with a crisis and getting money into the hands or getting the solution in place. This is a really important thing, and digital currency contributes to that ability to make that happen more quickly. It wasn't long ago where you would have a car accident and then a couple of days later come in and fill out a claim form, and meanwhile, where is your car and so on. We can see applications like that taking off. We're actually not inventing a lot of this stuff, but we are bringing it into Barbados. And I'll say maybe as just a final point, and I'd be very happy to sort of talk more in the Q&A about this. But in addition to all of what has been said about facilitating transactions, just the confidence that our economy is going to get from a world perspective of having a central bank supported currency. This does good things for business confidence. This does good things for investment. And these are all things that we hear often talk about in Barbados. But I really believe that the creation of the digital currency and also the beginning of what will be a pan-Caribbean, I hope, settlement network and payment facilitation network is going to do great things for confidence for our region as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I couldn't agree with you more. So, last but certainly not least, my favorite guy. John, tell us, what is it doing for you?
Thank you, Marla. I see a lot of startled faces when you said your favorite guy. I think you may have said that before. But for those of you from Barbados, you're wondering, what's this guy who sells shirts and socks on Broad Street doing up there, right? Well, we have a deal. No, it is the question of the Caribbean Settlement Network is really important to us. People know Cape Shepherd really for the store on Broad Street. Fact is that through our Colombian Emeralds International, we're in 9 islands, we're on 11 cruise ships, and then we have financial services businesses as well. But just to take a step back, I've been in business long enough to know about the multilateral clearing facility of being kind of at a management level when that was going on and so on. So I think it really is, there's no question that although it ended, unfortunately, in macro failure, it certainly encouraged a lot of activity during the time. And what I've seen is that there's been an absolute shift in the 70s into the early 80s. The whole integration of CARICOM and the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean in particular, was driven by government, by policy level. And that has largely now, although we have a new Prime Minister who's keen to get it going again because the Prime Minister of Barbados is responsible for CSME, the integration of the last the 90s and the 2000s and so on has really been driven by the private sector, places like Massey and Goddard's and Grace Kennedy and so on, and they've been the ones driving the integration. And I see that as what will continue as well. I think it is businesses and people who will drive integration rather than policymakers. But we do need the policymakers to make sure that the environment, the legislation is right. And this is why it's so exciting to see that this particular initiative has a combination of national, multilateral, as well as private actors in it. Specifically from a Cape Shepherd Group perspective, we do have, as I said, we're in 9 islands. We do trading, and it is the, I think you use the term friction. It really is a friction that is the issue. The bureaucracy, the red tape, the delay, the paperwork, however you want to describe it, that really is a pain when, for example, as a group you take up one insurance premium, but you want to allocate that to the countries, and you don't want to build up massive intercompany debts, or, as the point was made, large surpluses in one country and having to borrow monies in another. So there's a very practical point. I've said that the larger groups, and we're not a particularly large group, but we're large enough, we manage with it. But it really is something that is a frustration for smaller businesses. So smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses just don't have the time to do that sort of thing. So the idea that a settlement network could really make things very much easier for somebody who's exporting or importing, I think is really the exciting thing for me. I'm very, as I said, we have some financial services, and very mindful this is a Bitt conference, but Marla asked me on 2 occasions to say a little about our digital journey. And we've done it across the group, and just probably like any other group, there are varying degrees of success. But we certainly see the future in the area of digital, and in our, for example, our Cape Shepherd card mobile app, which is not blockchain, so it's a kind of old school technology. But we've seen a tremendous response from our card holders to that. And interestingly, not interestingly, of note is the fact that the real response is in the area of P2P transfers, but also we're making a concerted effort for those micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, which have been terribly underserved by the commercial banks. And I understand the economics of it. I know what the P&L looks like. You know, somebody who is doing kind of $2,000 a month in business is not the sort of person that you can put a lot of technology and effort and relationship management behind. But that's where we see it really being exciting in terms of moving to the digital age. And with it comes that economic enfranchisement as well. So that's what I see. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yes, we need to make mu equal to 0, right, Bruce? So actually now I would like to open up the floor to Q&A from the audience. Akil has a mic, and so I guess if you put your hand up, the mic will find its way to you, and you can ask us your question related to what the panelists talked about just now, but also if there's anything related to what was discussed earlier that I could possibly help with. But let's try to make sure it's related to what we just discussed on the panel. We have Dr. King to kick us off with the first question.
Well, not to disappoint, it's not a question, it's just a comment. But when Bruce mentioned the meaning of mu in his line of work, he put mu on the screen, and the first thing that occurred to me as an economist is that mu is a familiar symbol, because we use mu in economics for the rate at which money grows in an economy, and therefore the rate of inflation. And one thing central banks want to have control of in order to keep inflation low and stable is the rate of growth of the money supply. So both from the engineering perspective and from the economics perspective, what we are talking about here is getting mu down to 0.
Indeed, well said, Damien. Thank you for that. That was a huge endorsement for you, Bruce, just so you know. Damien does not give that was a compliment, by the way, in Damien speak. Okay, good. Any other comments or questions from the audience? Come on, really? Carmel. Akil, right here.
Racquel, can you talk more about the opportunities for either fintech companies or other type of startups in the context of an accelerator? How do you address this structural problem? What are you seeing as far as real use cases, what ideas and what concept on how companies actually implement green tech when you are in a region that's always on a path? Can you really build for category 5? I know we were talking about this. You know, how do you build around this, and what are you seeing that the ideas and the innovations are around that?
Sure. So there's a lot there's a lot that's taking place in this space, and what we're trying to encourage, we're working with many businesses in Silicon Valley. There are certain technologies that have not changed in 100 years. Air conditioning, for example, hasn't changed in 100 years, and the coolant that causes the refrigeration is terrible for the atmosphere and contributes to our climate change. So that is one area. But what we're encouraging entrepreneurs to do is to think about, we are on the front lines, and that is, you know, both the best and the worst thing. It's the best thing because we can see what we require for adaptation. So, you know, the waters are coming in. We need higher seawalls. We need better coral reefs. You know, there are people who are coming up with different kinds of technologies to replant coral reefs and to get them to grow. In terms of the space, especially from a fintech perspective, creating a mechanism to invest in blue and green businesses is a huge need right now, especially small and micro businesses, because that's what we have most of. The Accelerator serves a much larger audience, and so what we're finding is that we are creating portfolios of projects. So if we can get sort of 10 good projects together to get to the 2 million, then we can kind of put those projects together and hope to balance that risk in the portfolio, but to also be able to get investment around it. But there is a need, and your Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, has this vision of this regional investment fund that can create the opportunity to allow investors to invest in these kinds of businesses, and it certainly is the thing that needs to happen. So I think that there are any number of opportunities, whether you're looking at adaptation, whether you're looking at mitigation, whether you're looking at, simple solutions, whether you're looking at solutions that have the ability to scale and get really large and be exported, whether you're wanting to export services. And I certainly think that building this capacity and creating this network is something that is going to create so much of an opportunity for us to export services about our know-how, about this transition that we're going through. And if we do it well and if we do it properly, this can be a whole new segment for us as an export.
I agree. It reminds me of the Estonians and their e-governance academy, that they're now exporting that service all over the world, including in this region. And so you're right. This is something that we can become, world-leading experts in, and then we roll it out in other parts of the world. I hope that's somewhere we'll get to.
I'd love to see that, and to see, young people getting involved in doing that and looking at that as an opportunity and as a career path. And we do so well in the Olympics. And when we look at, per capita medal count for the last 4 Olympics, the Caribbean dominates the top 10. But somehow that confidence in our ability to do something absolutely unexpected and magical, we just can't seem to leapfrog. And back to, who was the person who was mentioning the leapfrogging this morning, but I thought it was brilliant. Was that you? Yeah, okay, all right. We're gonna give him credit for it. But it was so actually, I think it was the CEO of Overstock.
It was Jonathan.
Yes, Jonathan. That's all right. Yes. But I'm sure you enriched the point. But it's so important for us to start thinking about how do we move from where we are, and instead of chasing that graph behind everybody else, how do we leapfrog from where we are to become world leaders?
We can do it, for sure. Any other questions? We have about, I would say, 5 more minutes, and then we'll be back on track with our time. Yes, there is a question. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see.
Good afternoon. It's Peter Thompson from 10 Habitat. We're in the entrepreneurial development space. I want to talk a bit about remittances, or ask a bit about remittances, because on a global level, remittances in volume exceed foreign direct investment, exceed official development investment from the multilateral institutions. And so it is a potentially very large pool of capital. And the inefficiencies, the mu in this is, of course, the fees that are charged to people who can least afford it. But the same people who are charging the fees, the Western unions and so on, I know they have an experiment with Ripple. So what I'm getting at is it's very tempting to conceive of blockchain technology as being a solution, but when the same players have access to the same technology, are fees really going to come down, or are they simply going to use their market position to increase their own margins using blockchain technology?
John, you want to take that? Do you or no?
Thank you. I won't take it from any particular knowledge of remittance, and thankfully we're not in the remittance business. And I say thankfully two ways, so I'm not on the spot, but also I do believe that somebody anyone who is very dependent on remittance business now for their profitability is probably very worried, and has been for a little while, and will continue to be for a little while. I do believe that yes, the existing remittance businesses will be looking to use the latest technology, or blockchain, distributed ledger, and so on. But the fact is that it is not proprietary to them. So I expect that the same way that when I started in business, certainly in Barbados 35 years ago, and a cruise ship was coming in, we put out all the crystal and the china and the finest things because these people had a lot of money. And now to paraphrase someone who's sat on the board of Bridgetown Cruise Terminals, when you see some of the cruise passengers get off, you think you'd like to buy them a drink and give them 2 straws. And I think that is what will happen to that remittance business as well. The fees will come down, yes.
Thanks, John. Alicia wanted to add.
Right, thank you. You can hear me well? Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir. That's a very important question. But I think it goes back to the beauty of what the CSN could possibly do. Because with the CSN, you're bypassing those middlemen. You're bypassing the Western Unions. You're sending this money to your loved one directly through an app on your phone. So you're not going to have to pay the high fees that, say, a Western Union would charge.
I think also, I just want to add that, there was an announcement not too long ago about Libra, and it looks as though, to your point, John, that whoever is in this business must be very scared. Because even if Libra gets delayed, the point is that this is happening, and charging the poorest people 15%, 12%, 10% even, to move small amounts of money is just atrocious. And so if you look at the World Bank data on the cost of remittances, there are quite a few countries where they've actually brought remittance channels down to the cost of even 1 or 2% in some instances I've seen on the World Bank's website. So it would be good to have a look at that website in terms of where it's searchable and you can see from different countries, source to destination countries, and what the costs look like for the different mechanisms of remittances. And there are some solutions out there that are quite inexpensive. But in this region, in general, it's roughly 7 to 15% on average. Okay, I think I have room for one more question or comment. Would anybody like to take that? Okay, Salpi Wilson over here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very interesting discourse and discussion. I want to make 2 points, or seek clarification on 2 issues. One is, deals with resilience. We live in a hurricane belt, and we need to be wary that our data is always recoverable as quickly as possible. So data recovery is very important for the Caribbean countries. And I wonder what is being done in that regard. The other point is, we've heard from John that the business is driving the integration, but they're dependent on the policy environment. How are we proposing to influence the policymakers in the environment?
2 very good questions. How we propose to influence the policymakers. You want to take this one, Jeff? Sure.
Actually, I was going to say, Marla, I could take the first part of the question if that's all right. The data one. And I think the comment is exactly right, which is we're actually living in a world where there's real assets and then there's information assets. And actually, a storm sort of doesn't really determine which type of assets it's going to wipe out. You can imagine at an insurance company like ours, we put a huge amount of work into understanding exactly what is going to happen if that storm hits here, and claim calls start coming in about 25 minutes after that. It's not just about having people in disaster recovery sites who can take telephone calls. It's actually about getting our systems back up and running. And protecting our data is incredibly important. We're lucky we live in a world now where we can buy capacity, we can buy redundant networks, we can buy storage, we can buy off-site facilities, and I think those of us that manage big amounts of data, like an insurance company, have invested heavily in those technologies that are now available at a much more affordable cost. We don't really build, we buy that kind of a service, and it's worth paying for. So the idea that, that we're only worrying in a big storm about the loss of physical assets is just the tip of the iceberg. And I think you're onto a very important point, and it's worth, you know, we're fortunate we live in an era now where we can actually protect a lot of that data. Yeah. That's what I'd say for now.
Thanks, Jeff. You wanted to add something?
If I could just answer this, or not answer, but address the second point. I'm glad I was asked it now and not a year ago. And the reason is that a year ago, the private sector representation at CARICOM level was dismal, and that would be being charitable. The fact is, though, that at I think it was early December, the Caribbean heads of government, the Prime Minister Motley, with the approval of the other heads, invited an impromptu delegation of representatives from the OECS, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, and Guyana, and Suriname to attend. The message was to the private sector grouping, go away, get yourselves organized, because we want to hear you, because you have to drive so much of what we want to do. And I will tell you that that work is more than going on. It has actually been submitted at the most recent Caribbean Heads of Government meeting. And it's not final, but it will, I think we're trying to get the balance between something that is focused enough that it gets things done, but wide enough that it is truly representative and not just a private club, but represents the private sector in its kind of widest iteration.
Thanks, John. Racquel, you want to comment?
Sure,
yeah.
From our perspective, I mean, we have to get the public discourse to, you know, as Barack Obama said, don't boo, vote. So we have to ensure that people are sufficiently educated, that the masses are sufficiently educated about what our options are and what are the things that we are giving up at this stage by not making progress. And so I believe the remittance business is having its Kodak, its blockbuster videos moment right now. Because if they haven't already started and haven't led that charge, they're already out of the water. So what we need to be able to do is to have enough people who are aware of what we need to get done to be able to force their politicians, either through, you know, lobbying, supporting, you know, having the right kinds of conversations, or to be able to vote for the people who are willing to do the right things. So that's how I believe that we will control the policy environment, by making it mandatory.
Just a quick point on the technology side. So thanks, Jeff, for mentioning that we can purchase these services, the servers and storage. I wanted to sort of loop back in on the term distributed ledger technology, which really is what Bitt is employing for the ECCB pilot project and for our own financial services. So distributed ledgers essentially means you have multiple nodes that all hold copies of the ledger, so that in any event of a disaster for any one of those nodes, you don't lose any of your records. So just wanted to plug that. That is the technology that we are working with.
Thank you. That's Simon, my Chief Business Development Officer. So the time has come to end the panel. I want to thank my panelists sincerely for your contribution. I want to thank the audience for participating. We have a couple more items on the agenda, and then, well, we have a break. I think we have a break now. MC, and then, so you'll come back to announce the break, or do I announce the break? Okay, so we have a 10-minute break. Thank you, everybody.